Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy and specifically to talk about the Russian ruble. Before any of the keyboard warriors start typing me messages saying, man, you're always talking about the Russian ruble, the reason that I'm posting so many videos about the ruble is because it's one of the only live pieces of data that we have. It actually updates on a daily basis during Monday to Friday when the exchange markets are open. And so it gives us a live feed as to what's happening in the Russian economy. And what we've seen over the past 4 months is that the Russian ruble has started crashing. And I've made a number of videos as it's hit certain points. So when it dropped down to 95 against $1, I made a video. I then made another one when it hit 96. I made one when it hit 97. And in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the fact that it's now breached the 98 level. And it is rapidly heading towards that 100 level that it hit back in October 2023, when President Putin stepped in, told the Russian central bank that they needed to do something toot sweet to sort it out. They started buying rubles in the market, and at that point, it then increased in value to around 89 against the US dollar. However, over the last 12 months, Russia has struggled to be able to keep buying rubles in the international markets because they're under a lot of pressure financially right now. This chart shows the movement in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Russian ruble over the past 6 months. And as you can see, the closing value of the ruble on Friday the 1st of November breached the 98 level. It was actually 98.25. And that is the worst rate that the ruble has traded at any point in the last 12 months. And if we look specifically at what's been happening over the past 4 months, you can see that at the end of July, one US dollar was trading for 84.3 rubles. So that means that over the past 4 months, we have seen a deterioration of around 14% in the value of the ruble. And a 14% fall in a 4-month period for a major currency is an absolute disaster. Now, whilst we're looking at this chart, one thing that has been raised in the comments on a number of occasions is why I don't show the ruble against the dollar. So basically this chart, but the opposite way round, so that you could see the graph going down rather than going up. Because what this graph shows us is that the dollar is strengthening against the ruble. And whilst aesthetically it would be more pleasing to see the graph going down, the reason that I don't show it that way round is because the numbers are a lot more difficult to get your head around. So this chart actually plots the exchange rate between the Russian ruble and the US dollar, so the opposite way around. But the problem with looking at it this way is that one Russian ruble equates to 0.0102 US dollars. And that compares to the exchange rate back in January 2006 of 1 ruble to 0.0354 US dollars. So hopefully looking at this, you can start to understand why I'm talking about it the other way around, because it's much easier for me to talk about the ruble deteriorating in value from a level of 90 to 98 rather than 0.0354 to 0.0102. And for anybody that's sitting there thinking, well, why are you talking about the US dollar against the Russian ruble? Because Russia isn't dealing in dollars anymore. Let's have a quick look at what the ruble's been doing against the Chinese yuan. This chart shows the exchange rate between the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble over the past 12 months. And as you can see, the shape of this chart is identical to what we just looked at for the US dollar. So basically that tells us that the ruble has been deteriorating in value against the yuan as well as the dollar. And if we zoom in and have a look at what's been happening over the past 4 months, at the end of July 24, one Chinese yuan was trading for 11.7 Russian rubles. Today it's trading for 13.8, which represents a fall in value of around 15%. So actually the fall in the value of the ruble against the yuan is worse than it is against the US dollar. And clearly that's a major problem for Russia because China is now Russia's biggest single trading partner. So why is the fall in the value of the ruble important? Well, it's important for a number of different factors. Firstly, the strength of your currency is generally regarded as being linked directly to the strength of your economy. If your economy is booming, if all of your companies are doing really well, if they're exporting lots of products, then generally speaking, other countries will want to trade with them. Therefore, they'll want to buy your currency. That drives up the demand for your currency, and so the value goes up. It's simple economics. However, from Russia's point of view, what we're seeing is the value of its currency is dropping like a stone. That tells us that there are problems in the Russian economy. Russian companies, on the whole, aren't doing well. There isn't a lot of demand to trade with them, partly because of the sanctions and partly because it's having to change all of its supply chains. There isn't a high demand for Russian rubles, and therefore the value of the ruble is falling. But actually the situation is worse than that, because immediately following the invasion of Ukraine, President Putin tried to establish the Russian ruble as a competitor to the dollar. He wanted everybody to start doing trades in rubles rather than US dollars. However, unfortunately from his point of view, there has been a big backlash against that. And China and India, who are now the two biggest trading partners from Russia, are both refusing to deal in rubles. So even though they're buying large quantities of oil and coal and other fossil fuels, they're not paying for them in rubles. Therefore, there's no demand for rubles. And that's one of the reasons why the value of the ruble is falling. And also one of the reasons why the strength of the yuan is going up. Because every time that Russia is doing trade with China, it's increasing the demand for Chinese yuan. One of the other issues relating to the fall in the value of the ruble is an increase in prices in Russia. And this relates directly to everything that Russia is importing. This chart shows the movement in the official rate of inflation in Russia over the past 12 months. And what this shows is that in September 2023, inflation was running at 6%. Today, it's sitting at 8.6%. And over the past 12 months, there has been a rapid rise in prices in Russia. And one of the reasons for this is because the value of the ruble has crashed. In order to explain the impact on inflation of the falling ruble, if we take an example of an item that's priced at $1 in the international markets, at the end of July, $1 was trading for 84.5 Russian rubles. So if you were importing that product, somebody in Russia would pay 84.5 rubles for it. That would be the exchange rate price. However, that same product today, even though it's still being sold for $1, so the actual price hasn't changed in the international markets, if you were selling that in Russia today, you would be selling it for 98.3 Russian rubles because the exchange rate has fallen to that level. So that means that the price of that product has gone up by 16% over the past 4 months, which is higher than the current rate of inflation. So Russia is struggling at the moment as a result of the fact that the ruble's deteriorating. It means that every single thing that it's importing, whether it be from the USA or China or India or anywhere, is going to be priced at a higher level. So that's fueling this really big increase in inflation. And one of the problems from Russia's point of view is that the Russian central bank is tackling inflation by increasing interest rates. Interest rates are now sitting at 21%, the highest that they've been since 2003. And that's going to be prohibitive in terms of both businesses and individuals borrowing money. So there will be, generally speaking, a lack of investment from all of that borrowing, and therefore that's going to slow down the Russian economy even further. Now, in terms of exports, theoretically, if the value of your currency falls, it should make your exports more attractive. So if we take the example of a product that was being sold out of Russia, and it was priced at 84.5 rubles. So back in July, 84.5 rubles equated to $1. So that product would have been selling around the world for $1. However, today, because the exchange rate has fallen to 98.3, that same product would be selling for around 86 cents. So it's now cheaper in the international markets. Therefore, theoretically, demand could increase because as price goes down, it makes it more attractive, people buy more, and therefore you sell more and make more profit. It's still costing the same in Russia to make it, but you're bringing in more revenue. So that's the theory. But the problem from Russia's point of view is twofold. Firstly, its products are not being priced in Russian rubles. They're selling things like oil and coal, which are being priced in the international markets either in US dollars or Chinese yuan or some other currency. So the fall in the value of the currency isn't helping them directly because they're not selling those products for significantly lower prices. But the other thing that's also impacting the Russian economy is that the exporters, the Russian companies that are making more profit in terms of Russian rubles, if they're selling something for $1, that dollar is worth more in Russian rubles today than it was 4 months ago. The problem that those companies have is that Russia introduced rules over 12 months ago, forcing all of those companies to convert all of that currency into Russian rubles. Well, it's actually 90%, but it's the vast majority of it. And as they're converting it into rubles, they're then suffering from that deterioration in value. If they were holding all of their money in US dollars, for example, or Chinese yuan, then they would have a currency hedge built in because they wouldn't worry about what was happening with the ruble because they were protected as they had all of their money sitting in another currency. But as they're having to convert and then probably having to convert back again a few months later when they want to do more trades internationally, they're suffering the losses that are being encountered by the fall in the value of the ruble. Another factor that's a major concern for both companies and individuals in Russia is the loss of value of their wealth. So if you think about an individual that has 1,000,000 rubles in savings, and that sounds like a lot, that guy is a millionaire in Russia. However, in terms of the exchange rate back at the end of July, 1,000,000 rubles equated to around $11,800, so not quite as exciting as it first sounded. However, that individual today, if they wanted to exchange their 1,000,000 rubles, it's only going to be worth around 10,200 because the ruble has fallen by around 14%, and that means that the international purchasing power of their savings has also fallen by that same amount. And what that means is that both companies and individuals in Russia are suffering badly as the value of the ruble deteriorates. It means that their purchasing power around the world is falling on a daily basis. And what that means in a lot of countries is that people start to lose faith in their own currency. And that's why we see a high level of dollarization in countries such as Argentina and Turkey, because people want to protect their wealth. They don't want to see their assets deteriorating on a daily basis because the value of their currency is crashing. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the value of the ruble is one of the key metrics that we can look at on a daily basis. Everything else gets published either monthly or not at all in terms of Russia having closed down a lot of the information flows. So we're struggling to find things that give us a day-by-day update as to what's happening in the Russian economy. And what we're seeing in terms of the value of the ruble is that it's continuing to crash. And the reason that I'm making so many videos on the ruble is because it keeps hitting these milestones, and it's now past the 98 to $1 level. And it'll be really fascinating to see whether or not Russia allows it to go past the 100 level. This time last year, President Putin stepped in and said enough was enough. I don't want to see the ruble trading at more than 100. However, does the Russian central bank have enough money left to be able to keep supporting the ruble in the international markets? The evidence from the last 4 months indicates that it might not. It's letting the value slip every single month. And I think there is a real possibility that the value will trade up above 100. And once it breaches that level, who knows how low it could go. And as we've talked about in today's video, there are some serious implications here for the Russian economy. Firstly, in terms of inflation, it's driving up prices. As the value of the ruble falls, everything that Russia's importing increases in price at a higher level than the current rate of inflation. So that's keeping pressure on the economy. Now, the Russian central bank, to counter inflation, is increasing interest rates, but that's actually making things harder for Russian companies and individuals because they can't borrow money at an attractive rate. They're paying more than 20% interest, potentially up to 30% interest on any money that they're borrowing. So that's going to repel people. They're not going to want to do that. So that's going to reduce the level of investment within Russia, and that's not going to help the economy. Now, unfortunately, from Russia's point of view, there isn't a counterbalance in terms of the benefit for exports. Because of the fact that nobody's actually trading in Russian rubles, all of the deals that they're doing are being priced in other currencies. So they're not getting that counterbalance benefit. And also from Russian company and individuals' point of view, the value of their wealth is falling on a daily basis. As the value of the ruble falls, so does their international purchasing power. So the overall summary of today's video is that over the past 4 months, we have seen a rapid deterioration in the value of the ruble. That is now accelerating. It's heading towards that critical 1 to 100 level against the US dollar, and it will be fascinating to see what happens over the course of the next few months. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.